I would love for people that maybe have never met you to just give a little bit of kind of your story. And you've got kind of a big date coming up.
Well, yeah, Chrissy I'm coming up on 40 years of recovery from an eating disorder, and that will be September the 19th. And that is huge for someone that has practiced an eating disorder really all my life. You know, it started at age 4 when the trauma started at age 4. I experienced something that was very traumatic. Now, not everyone has to have trauma in order to have an eating disorder.
Right.
A lot of us do, but mine did start with trauma. And I started overeating. My dad bought me a sack of candy, and I ate that, and I never got enough after that. And I was 4 years old. By the time I was in the first grade, they couldn't buy clothes for me off the rack. And I just kept eating and gaining weight and eating and gaining weight. And was an obese child, obese young teenager, young adult. It just kept going until I reached 287 pounds. But there would be different marks, like at 13, 230 pounds, you know, and so there's different highlights throughout that time. And food was my best friend and my worst enemy. I could not get enough food. I was a volume eater, whatever it was, I had to have a lot of it. And sugar was pretty much my go-to, but it wasn't just sugar. And I would have that combination of sugar and something salty and something crispy. And that I want to emphasize, it's volume. It took a lot of food. What I know today, you know, through a lot of treatment, a lot of work on my part, a lot of effort, a lot of help from a lot of people worldwide. I have received a lot of help, but I had to go look for it. They didn't come to my door and knock on the door. You know, I had to go seek out help for obesity. I had to go seek out help for what I was doing with food, and I didn't know how to stop it, you know. So I would find ways to lose the weight. And I did that 5 different times. I'd lose 100, 120 pounds. You know, I've been this morning, you know, looking at Facebook, kind of, you know, strolling on Facebook, and then went over to Instagram. Every other article is about weight loss. Weight loss, weight loss. There's a gimmick out there for anyone. You know, if we don't stand for something, we'll fall for anything. And there's a lot out there to fall for. And what it is people make billions of dollars off of people like us. And I fell for all of it. I fell for every bit of it. And so I would do the newest gimmick, whatever that looked like, and I would lose 100, 120 pounds on a strict, rigid diet or a regimen, you know, and I would do that religiously. And it would take me maybe 6 months to lose the weight. Then the next 6 months, I would gain it back. And I did that. I wore my body out. I wore my family out. I wore the people at church out. They knew, and you know, I'd go to school with my kids, and, you know, come September, I'd be thin and looking good. You know, by the time school was out, I'd be the fattest mom at coming to school functions. It just baffled everyone, especially me.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
So, if you think about the habits that were being formed at that time around food, what was the reason you went to it? Was it to cover up trauma?
There was a hole in my soul caused from trauma. I came from a very dysfunctional family, and I witnessed something very traumatic, very traumatic. Well, what I witnessed was my dad cutting a man's throat from one ear to the other because he had had an affair with my mother. And that mother would always take me with her and her person that she was having an affair with, and I called it our boyfriend, our affair. That is so much child abuse, that, you know, exposing a child to something, you know, the sexual acting out that early and then holding the secret. I was the secret keeper. And it created a hole in my soul that was so big. It was like the Grand Canyon, and I couldn't fill it up. There was nothing to fill it up with. I did start taking myself to a little church that was behind our house when I was 8 years old, and I did find the God of my understanding there. And those little people, they didn't ask me any questions. They just loved me. And that is the answer, to love the person, place, or thing that makes us angry. It didn't cure me. It didn't, I kept eating, and I did have the anger. That I carried the anger into my adult life and became a rager. And I reserved that rage to the people I loved the most, and that was my children. And later on, the rage was toward my employees. Mm-hmm. I couldn't stop the rage. My father was a rager, and, as children, we pick up our parents' unresolved feelings. What they haven't worked through, we pick them up. Right. I picked up self-pity from my mother, and I picked up rage from my father, and it's a deadly combination. I would rage, somebody would hurt my feelings, and so I'd get to feeling sorry for myself, and then I would get angry at the person, and I would rage at them, and the cycle would start over, and I hated my own guts. Mm. And the only thing that would help fill up that hatred that's of myself was food. Mm. And it quit working after a while.
Yeah. It quit working, and did you find yourself feeling like you were the only one that was going through it? Was it an isolating experience to be with the food?
It was very isolating, and I didn't tell the secret. That was a big family secret. I did not. I had a lot of shame. Children pick up the shame of the conflict that they live in, and I picked up my mother's sexual shame, my father's sexual shame, and I carried that, and I carried the story of what my sister left home real early. We called it escapage. She left home, got married real early. And so I became my mother's benefactor. I became her everything. I took care of my mother. I loved and adored my mother. And I was scared to death of my father. So what I ate over was those unresolved feelings of the past, the shame, and something didn't.
Yeah.
And I never told the secret to anyone. My husband didn't even know. He didn't know that I had been sexually abused by my father. He didn't know because I had packaged myself in such a way. And how I would do that is, even as a kid and as a young teenager, I would watch people and I would pick out habits that they had or what things they were doing, the way they were dressing or something, and I would emulate them. I would watch people eat at a restaurant. I didn't know how to use silverware, but I would watch and I would learn and I would copy them. I became I was self-taught in a lot of ways, Drove by the time I was age 10, did a lot of things that was not age appropriate. So we were sitting and fast forward, we were a pretty good looking good family. We did
describe what that is, a looking good family.
Is, we look so good on the outside.
Sure.
We had the 2-story house with the red geraniums out on the porch, American flag flying. We looked good. We had the little dog running around. We had the kids that when they stepped out of that house, they stepped out looking like they'd stepped out of a bandbox. My kids I dressed them like we were wealthy. We were not. No. But I took every spare penny that we had to make my kids look good, because when they looked good and people bragged on them, I looked good. That's where I got my self-esteem and my self-worth. And when they would say, with all of these children, because we raised 7, my husband and I had a blended family, and we raised 7 children together. And they would say, "How do you keep your house so clean? How do you keep it so orderly?" Oh, I lived for those compliments, and I slept maybe 3 or 4 hours a night in order to accomplish that. I was very rigid with my kids. I was abusive to my children. I was the one that was abusive to the children because I had that unresolved rage and anger and shame from my childhood.
And even though you stopped the behavior, the food, what came up, or what generally comes up for people when they put their substance down? What happened for you?
Okay, so I would have times of losing the weight. I did that 5 different times, 100, 120 pounds. I would be very diligent on this certain diet. And it would usually hover around from 5 to 800 calories. I do not recommend that, but I would be focused and I would have a mission to lose that weight. The minute I lost it, that those feelings began to come up. They would flood me more than they ever had. I covered up a lot of my feelings with the food. It helped until it quit working. After a while, I couldn't eat enough to dull the pain. I couldn't. So, I was addicted to the rage, my own rage, to the sound of my own voice. And I hated it, but I could not stop. I could not stop. And I did find ways to lose the weight. And I would find different ways to lose it in a healthy way. I could not keep it off because I hadn't dealt with the core pain, that core pain that I carried from my childhood. And I want to say this, I don't think any parent wakes up some morning and says, "Well, today's the day I go mess up my kids' lives."
Right.
I don't think my parents intentionally set out to abuse me, to abuse my sister, to give us a life full of rage and anger and chaos. I don't think they did that. I think they were acting out of what they were taught. This is a generational curse. It's a generational curse. And if we don't stop it, and I will tell you, families can stop it in one generation. This generational curse can be stopped in one generation. But it takes someone that is willing to it takes someone like me. I got sick and tired of being sick and tired.
There was a day that you said enough is enough.
Yes, and I knew from an early age, from the day I went to that little Baptist church at age 8, I knew there was a God. I knew, and I really never questioned him why I was in such a mess, but I knew that he was the way out. I knew he was the way out. I didn't know what that would look like, and I didn't know that the way out would be that I would, I always swore I'd never marry an alcoholic, and I did, because they looked different. He looked different than my mother. His drinking was different. He could get up and go to work every day. I had no idea about the disease of alcoholism.
When you have the alcoholism in the family and you have the food as a married partnership, how does that work?
Well,
or does it?
It doesn't too well. I knew, because I'm so self-centered, I knew that my husband had a problem with drinking. I did, and my mother, was an alcoholic and prescription drug addict. And I started educating myself about alcoholism. Now, it took a while, and I took my anger out on my husband. He'd get drunk, I'd beat him up. I am not proud of that. I had so much rage. But through the years, I realized that alcoholism was a disease. But when I didn't know that it was, what would happen is, I had lost 100 pounds before I married the man. Mm-hmm. And I was just a teenager. I was 19 I was actually 18 when we married. He was older.
Was he cute?
Not particularly, but he had enough money to get me out of that house. That's
right.
the deal.
Yeah.
And later on, when we would, we both got in recovery and we'd be invited to speak at different gatherings, for recovery groups, what, he would say, he said, well, she was looking for security and I was looking for sex, and we put it together and called it love.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. I was looking for security for me and my baby son that I had from the previous marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I looked good. I'd lost weight. I was young. And he got a prize. He really did. And I did too. In a lot of ways, it took years for me to realize I'd hit the jackpot with him. Mm-hmm. And by the time we were married a week, I knew I'd married an alcoholic. And he started watching. I went back to eating that first week of our marriage. And by Christmas, I had gained all that weight back. And we married in September. Hmm. By Christmas, I was 100 pounds overweight. If you don't think that can happen, follow some of us around that have the disease of obesity, because it takes lots of food. And it did for me. And I would gain the weight back and then I would lose it. So we always said the joke was on both of us.
Right.
I didn't know I was marrying a drunk and he didn't know he was marrying a fat girl.
And it worked out in the end very, very well. But it was a lot of negotiation, I imagine, and a lot of stress and, prioritizing your own health?
Well, it was him finding, learning to mind me.
Right.
And to quit drinking. No.
We are perfectly delightful when we get to make all the decisions, aren't we?
What happened was I got so ill, emotionally ill. And I found the Al-Anon family group in October of 1968. And it saved my life. I actually went for my mother. I had so much denial about my husband's alcoholism. I just thought he was a periodic. He would stay sober 3 or 4 months. And then when he'd get drunk, he would come home for 3 or 4 days. And he'd say, then he'd be sober for 3 or 4 months. And he said, see, I told you I wasn't an alcoholic. I didn't know that there was different types. I didn't know he was a periodic alcoholic. So I went to Al-Anon first for my mom. And I'm very grateful I stayed because it changed my life. I learned that I didn't cause the drinking. I couldn't cure it. I couldn't control it. That it was not my fault. I also learned it was okay to love an alcoholic. Just don't love him to death.
Just don't love him to death. And one of the things that you've talked about before is the amount of grace and maybe community it takes to get through something like that. Did you have a solid support system in Buffalo Gap and Abilene, or did you have to travel at that time to get support?
Well, I had to be willing to go find the support. They did not track me down and knock on my front door, except one woman did after I got into the program. No, I had to go look for help, and I had searched for help since I was 13 years old. Mm-hmm. Took myself to psychiatrists. I was working at a theater, saved the money, $125 for an hour, and I went 3 times, and the sucker would go to sleep every time. So I was seeking. I was a seeker of help. I would have gone anywhere to find information. And I'm not bragging about myself. I'm just saying that is how God worked in my life. In that, I knew there had to be some solutions to what was happening with us. That all I had ever known was disease and discontent and horrendous abuse. That's all I had ever known. But I had a knowing, a childlike knowing that there was another way to live. So, like I said, I started seeking. And I'll tell you, I saw an ad. No, it wasn't an ad. It was Dear Abby. I don't know if anybody remembers the Dear Abby column. She was a
advice column.
An advice column. And she someone wrote in and they talked about Al-Anon, the Al-Anon family group. Now, in the 50s, I took my mother to AA meetings in Odessa, Texas. She got a year clean. I went. They had no program for kids. So while she was at the meeting, and I was about 10 or 11, while she was in the meeting, I'd go across the street to the little grocery store and eat while she was in the meeting. But I always wanted to know what they were doing. Mm-hmm. There was an old song that was popular around then in about 55, 56 called What's Behind the Green Door? Mm-hmm. And that building where she went had a green door. And I so wanted to know what was behind that. But help for Al-Anon started in 1957. And then later, we started Alateens, but I missed all of that. I didn't get any help. So later on, while my husband was still practicing alcoholism, I went back to school to become an addiction therapist, because my motivation for doing it was not so much to help alcoholics. I love alcoholics, still do. I can get addicted. I love them. I don't get addicted to them today, but I love the personality of an alcoholic. I just love everything about alcoholics.
Well, the sense of humor, we've talked about hidden anger before in some of the course material, and they're funny. They're funny. It's great to be in a room with them, especially when they're storytelling. Because what I've realized is that, when you can look at your own behavior and kind of just own it and make it is what it is, it's hilarious.
It is. Yeah. And we really can't tell the stories until we've lived it and walked through it and got to the other side. Yeah. We have to get to the other side and look back. And so that my motivation was to help families. I really wanted to help families, particularly children. There was really nothing available at that time. They wasn't talking about families. Most treatment centers might have one day where they bring the family in and educate them. The main thing was about trying to educate them about alcoholism. And then there was a woman that came along. Her name was Claudia Black. Her name is Claudia Black. She's still living. And she wrote a book called, and to my knowledge, it's the first one that was really directly, where anyone really directly talked about children of alcoholics. And the name of the book is It'll Never Happen to Me. Mm. And she wrote it as a child of an alcoholic. And she is a social worker and had worked around lots of abused children. And what she was seeing, that most of them came from alcoholic homes. And then but she always denied that she was a product of alcoholism. And then she went back home one day where she lived in Washington State. Her family owned a bar and she worked there many times. When she walked in that day and looked at her father, she thought, I was raised by an alcoholic. Mm. And she started looking at her own, and that's what we have to do to be effective in the field, I think. Mm-hmm.
Is look at your own behavior.
At our own self and get the healing before we get out there trying to heal someone else. We got to, what does it say? Heal yourself. I can't remember that scripture, but anyway.
Physician
heal thyself. Mm-hmm. And so we have to have something to give. We have to have our own healing. But I latched on to Claudia Black's book, and I was in recovery. I was in Al-Anon, and, I was in recovery from living with an alcoholic, living in the present day in the disease of alcoholism. I'd learned how to live in the disease of alcoholism and be okay. But I didn't really know and realize how I had been affected as a child until I read Claudia's book. And so when I went to my first adult children of alcoholic meetings, and I'd been in the program for a long time. When I went to my first ACOA meeting, I realized I was home free. I heard other people talk about what it was like to live, because children who live in the disease of alcoholism, experience things that children who are raised in so-called normal families never experience. They never experience. They never experience having to clean your mother up from a night of drinking, or to, not be old enough to go buy the booze, but she would call the liquor store and I'd drive at age 10 and pick up the liquor. They would hand it to me. A lot of things that, that's not age appropriate. Children of alcoholics grow up way too soon, and we grow up not knowing the direction. We have to make it up. We have to make up what we do, so we never know if we've done it right. And, I'm 82 years old, and I'm pretty much past that, but it can still float back by. And, every once in a while, in fact, I was in D.C. doing a workshop, and it crossed my mind, you are a fake and a phony. You don't know what you're doing. What are you doing here? And that's that ACOA, that's that adult child of an alcoholics coming through of, you don't know what you're doing. You're making this up. Because we have to make up a lot that we're not taught in alcoholic homes.
Is it because the alcoholic tends to isolate, or what's the dynamic there? Or is it the child thinking that they have to maintain responsibility through their life? Can they ever have fun?
Now, some can grow up. We all think that our life situation is unique and different, and they are. We all live unique and different situations. I think I've worked with a lot of dysfunctional people through the years, a lot of dysfunctional families. I would put mine right up there at the very top. And what happened is my father was a violent man. He was a rager. He was very violent. I'm not going to get into all the things he did, but he actually became a law enforcement officer, and he got away with doing a lot of the things he did under his badge. And so it was just a lot of dysfunction. And my father did not like dark-skinned people or people with black hair. He was white complected, had blonde hair, blue eyes. He was tall. He looked like a Texas Ranger with that Stetson hat on and hand tool boots. He was a good-looking man. And he had actually met my mother at a park, and she was like an orphan. And he took her on as a cause. He was a married man. That's a whole different story. But anyway, she went to live with him while he was still married. She was 18 years old. She was part Indian, dark-skinned, black hair. He despised anybody that didn't have white skin. My sister was white-skinned, blue-eyed, blonde-headed like my dad. That's what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I have dark skin, dark hair, black eyes, dark eyes. And so my father really never liked me. And then when I started gaining weight, that was a double whammy. He detested anyone that had any weight on them. And he would tell them up front, and call them names. And he called me names. And so I grew up with that self-hatred of, and then I hated men, not all men, but I was so scared of men. I was very, very scared of men.
Causes some distrust,
Yes,
it sounds like.
Lots of distrust.
Yeah, lots of distrust. So you decided to get healthy, and you decided to put yourself on the list, which is kind of what I'm hearing you say, is you served everybody else and had a lot of feelings about it, and you finally got the message. How long did it take your brain to clear? Food is definitely, you take it away for 2 or 3 days and your body physically.
Okay, so in 68, when I found Al-Anon Family Group, I was probably 250. Now, I did not find, and periodically I would lose the weight, but I'd gain it right back. And then there again, Dear Abby came through on her gossip column or advice column in the paper, and I noticed that there was a notice about Overeaters Anonymous, and this was in 1972. Well, it was really a little earlier than that, but there wasn't any Overeaters Anonymous in our area. I didn't know anything about it. And then I noticed it was 1972. There was a little ad in our newspaper where there was a woman going to start an Overeaters Anonymous meeting at a Baptist church in town. Now, keep in mind, in the early part of 72, I had found a doctor through a friend who had surgery. He was doing the first types of bariatric surgery, the type that is deadly. Most people don't live through it. I'm one of the few. So my friend had it. She was very smart. She was a school teacher, and I thought, well, if she's smart enough to have it, it's good enough for me. So I went in 1972, early part of 72. And I had to go 100 miles west of here to a clinic there where he was performing this surgery. My family doctor gave up. He would not be my doctor after that. And he said, and I'm not going to see any of your family because I don't want to see your orphan children. You will not live through this surgery. And until the day he died, he never spoke to me. I'd see him out in the community and he wouldn't speak to me. I took a lot of hits from having that surgery. So, but I weighed 287 pounds, and I would have done anything. And it was magic to my ears what I heard, and I'm sure he didn't say this. What I thought or what I made up is I could have the surgery and eat anything I wanted, that it would just go through me. And virtually that's what happened. It went anything. I mean, he made me like a straight gut. Anything I ate would come out. I had massive diarrhea. But I had made a decision. I talked my husband into supporting me in having the surgery. And he was leery of it, but he had watched me lose and gain and lose and gain and lose. By that time, I had lost 4 different times, 100 pounds or over, and gained it back. He had been there on the front lines with me. He knew how miserable I was. And so he agreed to it. And the night before I had the surgery, I know it was God speaking to me, but I didn't listen because I wanted to be thin. That's all I wanted. I wanted to be thin, thin, thin. And I heard almost in a booming voice, get up and go home, but I didn't, and I had the surgery. And I'm still paying for it. You know, I'm alive and well today. I did lose the weight, and I will tell you, the food part did not change at all. In fact, I ate more after I had the surgery than I did before because nothing changed.
No habits changed?
Well, the habits... the fact that I had a disease that I could not stop on my own, the surgery, even a surgeon's knife could not cut out the disease of compulsive overeating. No human being could do that. No one. Right. So I ate and I ate and I ate, and I lost a lot of weight. I got very, very thin. But I also lost calcium. I could not absorb. The absorption is very low when you've had this surgery. And I got pretty ill, but I would not tell anyone because I volunteered to have that surgery. Sure. And so I kept a facade, but I would have to go see the doctor, and, they would order me these. Anyway, I'd have to have blood transfusions. I mean, my anemia was very severe, down to 6 or 7. I mean, I put my life on the line to lose weight.
Yeah. And when you got healthy and you started treating, a lot of people come to me, and if they have any questions or they know I'm affiliated with you, they'll say, well, willpower will do it. Did you find that willpower was enough?
Will doesn't work very well. You wear out the will. Yeah. I lost 100 pounds 5 different times with willpower. Or there were 4 different times, and the 5th time was willpower. I was having the surgery, you know, and it will not. You can white knuckle it. You can do it for a while, and because the thing about it is, it's an inside job. What they don't tell you, what that doctor didn't tell me, Mrs. McCarty, you have a disease. It's twofold. It has a mental and emotional side, and it has a physical component. Your weight is due to the physical component, but the overeating is due to the mental and emotional side. You're eating, it's not what you're eating, but what's eating you.
What's eating you?
And I was feeding the pain of my childhood, trying to fill up that hole in my soul with food, and it quit working. Or I wouldn't have had the surgery. It quit working. And after I had the surgery, I couldn't stop the eating. I could not stop the eating. So the same year, toward the end of 72, was very thin. It's the same year I had the surgery. I noticed an ad in the paper where someone was starting an Overeaters Anonymous group, and they were having the first meeting at the library downtown. And I went with my thin body. Actually, I'm about the size I am now. Yeah, about the size, because I'd lost all the weight. And it's hard for me to say that because there's another part of my brain that wants to say, but you're still fat.
Sure.
I mean, I'm even hesitating to say that anyway. So I was a normal size, and I walked into that room, and there's about 50 people there. And one way or the other, I knew nearly everyone there because I'd either met them sitting at the Dyke doctor's office, or I had met them through Top's Club, Take Off Pounds Sensibly, or I had met them going and getting that shot of mare's urine. You know, I mean, I had done it all, and all these other people had, and now we were all gathered up together, you know.
What a crowd.
To Overeaters Anonymous, you know. And some people came up to me that I had known through Top's Club, Take Off Pounds Sensibly. In fact, I was crowned the queen one year, because I'd lost over 100 pounds. It was a big deal. I got to wear a crown, all of that. So they came up to me, and what I heard them say is, "What are you doing here? You don't belong here because you've lost all of your weight." And bless my heart, one more time I heard, "I don't belong somewhere. I don't belong." But you know what? It did not keep me from going back. I knew. I listened to that woman that was there that had started the meeting. I listened to her. And her husband was here in the Air Force, is what brought her to Abilene, Texas, to Dyess Air Base. And she, you know, everything starts on the east and west coast and moves toward the center. West Texas is the last to get the info, you know. So OA was started on the west coast, and there was meetings, you know, all throughout the United States. But that's when it came to our area, to Texas, to West Texas in 1972. When she told her story of how she had lost 100 pounds through Overeaters Anonymous and through the 12 steps, bingo, I was hooked, because the 12 steps was saving my life through Al-Anon. It was saving my sanity of living with an alcoholic. When I heard those same 12 steps could be applied to the overeating, I mean, I was in all the way. And it saved my life. The 12 steps. It's a problem-solving process that marches you up from the problem, step one, all the way to the solution. And what it is, it's a planned program of action that we learn to live every day. We work the steps the first time, and then we have to work them over if we have another
issue.
You know, because I thought, well, I've already worked them in Al-Anon, but I worked them again, and I've worked them many times. But after a while, you begin to live; they become a working part of the mind and body.
Yeah, it's amazing to watch the difference. You know, with the intensives that are here on site at Buffalo Gap, what happens is when you see people come in on a Sunday, they're carrying a lot of baggage, most of which I find isn't theirs.
That's
You
right.
know, they're giving the baggage back, family baggage, like you said, carried shame.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that you could carry shame from generation to generation
Yes.
and become, I've seen a lot of people on a Friday or on a Thursday afternoon leave and their persona is different. They feel joy,
Yeah.
they feel happy, and it's the magic that happens here that it's kind of like undescribable,
Yeah.
where you free the person from carrying the load of everything around them. That's how I would describe it. So what made you go from treating yourself to saying, I need to do this work as a passion?
Okay, so when, in 72, I did find Overeaters Anonymous, and I would like to tell you I got well, but I didn't, not in 72. Because what happened, our bodies want to restore themselves. And all of that weight that I lost, what happened was my body started adjusting to the surgery. And, very boldly, the diarrhea stopped. And when the diarrhea stopped, the overeating didn't. I kept up the overeating and I started gaining that weight back. That was the biggest fear of my life. Now, I didn't gain a lot of it back. I gained probably 50 pounds back, but that was a lot. By this time, by the time I gained it back from 72 into 85. Okay, so what happened was I got up in my little pea brain and I thought, that was the dangerous point. I got a thought going.
Uh-oh.
And I thought, well, if it's the diarrhea that's making me lose weight, what I need to do is take laxatives. So in 72, I started taking laxatives. And I'm not going to give you the brand. Don't want people to run out and get it. But anyway, I started taking laxatives. And it's like any medication. It stops working. So I would take 2, and then I'd take 4, and then 6, and 8. And from 1972 until 1985, I was up to taking 100 to 125 X-Lax a day.
Unbelievable.
And I was in the addiction field. In the late 70s, I started in the addiction field and was program director at a drug alcohol treatment center in Abilene. It was a wonderful treatment center, still is. And I got to, was in there, got to even help name it. So I was there from the very beginning. It was like one of my babies. I loved it.
Sure.
Still do. So I had this. And I was going to an internist. But one of the reasons that doctors a lot of times don't like to treat obese people or people with weight problems, a lot of them don't like to treat folks like us because we don't follow directions, and a lot of times, and we lie. We don't tell them the truth. We lie by omission. We leave out a lot of the story. I was going to that internist because my liver was falling. Was shutting down. It tested out as if I was alcoholic. My liver was shutting down. My colon was falling out of my body. And do you think I told that internist that I was taking 100 X-Lax a day? I didn't, because I did not want to stop doing it because I had that fear. I knew I'd gain that weight back. I had to go back and make my amends to that doctor, and I'll see him in town today at functions, and he's retired, and he always nods to me. I speak to him at the country club and all. But I had to go back and make my amends to that man. So what happened is I was getting very ill, and I did not know what I had. I didn't know I had an eating disorder. I'd never heard of an eating disorder. I'd heard of compulsive overeating and kind of heard a little bit about anorexia, but didn't know anything other than Cherry Boone, and some of the Karen Carpenter had it, But I wasn't educated. I didn't know anything about eating disorders until I heard this hip, slick, and cool young man from L.A., good-looking sucker, and he was a recovering drug addict. And he came to me. I walked in one morning to work, and he wanted to talk to me. We went into the library. I've always said it's abusive to point out a problem without pointing out a solution. And what Alan said, he said, Tennie, he started pointing out my symptoms. My face was almost as brown as this table it was covered with liver spots. My hair was falling out. I had no energy. It took one hand had to pick up one hand to pick up the other one. I would go into work. I couldn't do lectures. I couldn't stand up and hold the chalk. I would get the other counselors to work, and I would just sit and listen to their lectures. I was dying, and I didn't know what I was dying from. No doctor could diagnose me. And what this young man did, he said, you get up, you'll get upset in group or something, and us guys go out and smoke, and you go to the candy machine, you get your 2 Snicker bars, you lock yourself in the bathroom, and you come out and you've calmed down. And he said, Tennie, I think you're a bull. And I thought he thought I was gay, and I said, I think you're an idiot, Alan. What are you talking about? He said, I think you're bulimic. I'd never heard the word bulimic. Honest to God, and this was 1985, I'd never heard the word bulimia. And it's abusive to point out a problem without pointing out a solution. And Alan saved my life by pointing out a solution, by handing me a book called Fat is a Family Affair by Dr. Judy Hollis. And all Alan asked me, he said, would you be willing to read this book and then call my friend and his wife's friend, Michelle, who was going to work for this doctor she was already working with her. But they were opening an eating disorder unit in L.A. the following Tuesday. Now, I had been on my knees for years praying for an answer.
Right.
For an answer. And I started not to take the book because I thought one more time it was some kind of a joke, But I took the book and I went home and I read it. And it's the first time that I read where people did with food what I was doing with food, and did with the laxatives what I was doing with the laxatives, and doing the eating and then the starving, and then losing the weight and gaining it back. I had never talked to anyone that was that honest, and I had never been honest. I'd never told, never a soul. My 2 oldest daughters were practicing some eating disorder behavior in the house, but we never talked about it. I would just say, stay out of my room, which that meant stay out of my diet pills. Stay out of my laxatives. But we never talked about it because I didn't know what to talk about. I mean, I was practicing. I was trying my best to keep from gaining that weight back. I had hardly no eyes for my kids, but then I was so sick. So Alan handed me the book. I went home and read it, and I knew I had to go. I knew I had to go to L.A. My husband came home, and I asked him, so I called Michelle, and she said, can you be there here Tuesday? And I said, well, let me see, because my boss was out of town. He was on vacation. I said, but I knew what I could do. I ran that operation pretty much. I knew, but I was an untreated codependent then, and I knew how I could set it up where I could be gone, because I wasn't doing that much anyway. I was so sick. And I said, let me see what I can do. And I had, my youngest daughter was a senior in high school. She was still at home. The other kids was in college or gone off to seek their fortune or whatever. And so I read the book. I knew I had to go. I called Michelle, and my husband came home that night, and I asked him if he would read the book, and I told him what I was going to do, and he said, or I wanted to do, And he said, absolutely, I will not read that book. He said, this is one more gimmick. They're trying to get your money. They're trying to get, he said, I have watched you do all of this stuff. And no, I'm not going to read another thing. No, and I will not support you. And he turned around and walked out. But I knew I had to go.
And so you went.
And what he did the next day, to my unbeknownst to me, he was a speed reader. He took the book to work. He read every word of it. He came back and he said, you supported me all the way through my alcoholism. And yes, go. And they had told me they couldn't take me if my main family member didn't come. And my husband said, I will be there. You give me the date. And from that point on, my husband and my daughter Christy were the only two people in the world that supported me other than Alan and his wife. I mean, my other kids turned away from me. People I had sponsored for years thought I was nuts. People in my safe Al-Anon group and everywhere thought I had lost my ever-loving mind. I mean, it was hard. It was hard to do something that drastic. Well, I'd already had my guts cut out. Why not go do something?
Might as well finish it. Right?
So I did. Wasn't there Tuesday. I wound up there Wednesday. And I'll tell you, I spent 30 days. It was the hardest 30 days I've ever spent in my life. And I had to get off the laxatives, off the sugar, off of everything. I had a real bad withdrawal off the sugar. It took me 16 days. But I will tell you, when I came through that, I knew that I was going to be all right. I didn't know what it would all look like, but I knew I had a knowing. Just like I did at 8 years of age, God spoke to me, and I knew I was going to be all right. I did not know what it would look like.
That's faith.
But I knew I was going to be all right. On the way home, I wrote in my one of my meditation books that I'm going to go home, and if it be thy will, I'm going to start an all-addiction center with a primary focus on treating eating disorders.
And that was what year?
That was in 85. So I went back to the treatment center, and I did things different. I was different. I taught my clients how to confront. I taught them about boundaries. Everybody, the board thought I'd lost my ever-loving mind. I did get permission, and I started OA meetings there on Wednesday at the treatment center where I worked. By the end of that month, we had a full room. By the end of that year, we had an OA meeting every day of the week in Abilene, Texas. People were getting well. And so I had people coming to calling. You know, it's like energy that gets out. When there's something that happens, that energy goes out into the world. People were hearing that I went through treatment. People were hearing that I, was getting well from bulimia and all. And we started getting calls there at the treatment center for alcohol and drugs and asking if we treated people with food issues. So I put a little program together, I had me a little red folder, and I put a proposal together for the board of directors to let me start treating eating disorder clients there. I mean, God watches over children and fools. And, I think I've one, and other, that can't help themselves. Anyway, I put a proposal together about starting the eating disorder unit there. And they had a cottage out in the back that was just full of junk. And I had the vision that we could remodel that, and that could be the eating disorder unit. I knew because I had sat in groups in LA with alcoholics and eating disorder people. I knew that it was a common ground. I knew there could be a common mix there because addiction is addiction, whether you eat it, whether you drink it, whether you smoke it or inject it. And addiction is an addiction. And that's what I learned in treatment, that I had a deadly disease and it was an addiction. But it could be treated. It was the easiest disease in the world to treat. I mean, simple, excuse me, simple to treat, not easy,
Not easy.
but I could get well. I had a disease I could treat every day and get well. And boy, so I went to the board of directors and I figured it out that if they would lease me 4 beds, just 4 beds, I would take 4 beds in the detox unit. We never used those 4 beds. We'd never had that many detox people at a time. And it was kind of off away from the general population. And if they would let me lease those 4 beds, I would pay them that I was going to charge $3,500 for the treatment, and I would pay $1,000 for each client.
To the treatment center that had empty rooms and they were
empty.
Yeah.
And the director said, "Well, I think this because we were about to close for because of funding. It was a state supported. Anyway, it needed money,
Right.
by and large. And I mean, the board was excited about it, except this one man. And he said, he leaned back in his chair and he said, "Well, if this is such a good idea, why don't we just do it ourselves and we can make the $3,500. So I just snapped my little book closed and I got up and I walked out. I said, "Fine, y'all do it."
You took your book with you?
And I took the book. I know I wasn't going to do
your
it.
plan. No.
So I left. Well, here came the president and brought me back in. And they voted while I was sitting there. And every one of them voted for it. And so I look back, I don't know. I mean, God just blessed us indeed. So we got those 4 beds filled, and then we needed 4 more. And then in that year, I knew that I needed to go separate. I knew that I needed a separate unit, So I started meeting, having lunch. I ate more meals with the board of directors during that year than I did with my husband. Them trying to figure out a way that I would stay with them. And I said that it needs to be split. I just need to. So during that time, I was looking for a place to lease. By the way, the oil business was bad. We were in the oil business. There was no money anywhere. We were in a recession. When God speaks, you just go do it.
I hear determination
And
too.
I was so on my lunch hour, I'd go around and look for places to rent to start, because I know I didn't need a real big building, And I looked and I looked and I looked, and there just wasn't anything. There wasn't anything. And so Alan's wife was a recovering anorexic and bulimic, is the reason he recognized my symptoms. So she was going to be my business partner. Well, she didn't have a cent. She was just going to be my business partner. I was pretty ignorant about business, but anyway, she gave me a year, and that was good. She came and was here for a year. So together, Carmen and I we had a lawyer friend, formed a little corporation thing, and started looking for money. But then we were looking for a place to open. There was no money, and we were looking for a place to open. You're talking about 2 problems. So there was. I went ahead, and the board was warting me to death. They wanted to know, are you staying or going? Are you staying or going? Are you staying or going? So my oldest daughter was having her first baby, and I went up to Lubbock. It was in December, and we got into a snowstorm up there, and I was snowed in. I couldn't get out, and Christy, my youngest daughter, this was before cell phones, she called me there in my daughter's hospital room, and she said, "Mother, the president of the board," called his name, she knew him, called, and they want you to make a decision. They either want your resignation by December 31st, or they want a letter of commitment that you're going to be here for 5 years.
Oh my.
For
nothing or 5 years. That's quite a decision.
And so I knew that I wasn't going to do that, but I had no place to go. I had no place to go. So I was thinking, and I told Christy, I said, "Just type it up." And she could sign my name. I said, "Type up the resignation, call me back, read it to me." She did. I said, "Sign my name, take it by there." And she said, "Mother, are you sure?" "Yep." take it by there. I knew how to be a housewife. I knew I could go back home. I didn't have to work. I mean, my husband and I had made it all these years in the oil business. We could make it. I knew that I could make it. And so, but I needed a meeting. I needed a 12-step meeting. So I couldn't drive anywhere, but they'd cleared the parking lot. So I went downstairs and asked the receptionist, because there's usually 12-step meetings held in hospitals. And I asked her, I said, is there by chance any kind of a 12-step meeting around? Because it was around noon, getting ready to be noon. And she said, well, I don't know, but there's a meeting there in that building across the parking lot. And they're open because I see the cars over there. And she said, I don't know what it is, but I think it is a 12-step meeting. So I walked over there and went in. I still do not know what kind of 12-step meeting it was. But I got myself there and I sat down in that chair. And in a few minutes, this woman started talking. And she said that God had revealed to her that God would never show her where to go, where she was going, until she gave up where she was. She had to surrender where she was before God showed her what the next step was. That was my answer. I didn't even finish the meeting. I got up and I walked out and I was free. I knew that was my answer. I had to give up.
Yeah.
And so that's when I called Chrissy about the resignation. Yeah, I went back to the room then and called. You have to give up before God will reveal where you're going.
Gotta let it go from.
So anyway, I gave it up. And when I turned, now up until that point, that board of directors loved me. I mean, they coddled me because I worked so many hours, 10, 11, 12, 16 hours a day for those people. I worked weekends. I loved it. They would not speak to me.
Isn't it interesting when you quit giving people what they need from you, what the behavior is?
It was all men, all white men. I'm not, anyway. They did not give me a plant. They did not give me a send-off. And I'm the one that helped start that place.
Right.
I'm the one that picked the board of directors, God me. But anyway, nevertheless, it was sad to leave like that.
Sure.
The only thing the president said, he said, you'll never make it. You'll never make it. You might be lucky if you make it 3 months. And I'm going to keep this job open for you for 3 months if you want to come back.
Wow.
3 months he gave me. And I knew I'd never be back in that door.
You said, no, thank you.
So I came home. We had Christmas, New Year's Eve. We lived in Abilene then. New Year's Eve. I was sitting across where I live is right across the alley from where I live today. It was at a friend's home. We were invited there for a New Year's Eve party. And I was sitting there listening to, and I have ADD and I can hear lots of conversations. And I was listening to all the conversations. And someone said, Mulberry Street Market is just literally going to the dogs. They're getting into the buildings. The hobos off the train are living in the buildings. It's horrible. Somebody needs to do something about Mulberry Street Market. My ears perked up.
What's that?
So this property where Shades of Hope is, was a beautiful piece of property. And when my husband and I would fight at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd drive out here and walk and pray under these oak trees out here. I'd walk and pray.
Before you even knew you were looking for a place.
This was years before, when I weighed 287 pounds.
Yeah.
I would walk out here and pray and pray. So a woman had bought this, had remodeled it, and turned it in to Mulberry Street Market. It was a beautiful, high, fine dining restaurant. There was no alcohol in Abilene, Texas. Buffalo Gap got licensed to serve alcohol. This was a hot spot here. I mean, they could not accommodate all of the people who came to eat in this fine dining restaurant. And they had dormitories that they had was small apartments. There wasn't dormitories, there were small apartments, and they turned them into cute shops. It was just a delightful place called Mulberry Street Market. Well, Abilene went wet. They could buy liquor anywhere. This dried up. They lost business. Anyway, she went bankrupt. And this was sitting here. The economy was horrible. She couldn't rent it. She couldn't sell it. She couldn't do anything. But I found out it was Florence Henderson that owned it. And I could hardly wait. I got her number from my friend. And on New Year's Day, I called her. She lived at Dallas by then, and I told her what I wanted to do. She said, I'll be there tomorrow. Can you meet with me? And we met at a restaurant in town. And she said, can you meet me? And I said, yes. So in the meantime, now keep in mind, I was not really a businesswoman. I mean, no training for business. God trains you if you're open to it. So I put me a little proposal together that what I wanted to do was to go in and lease the property for 3 years, lease it, and at the end of the year, of 3 years, to have that lease with an option to buy. And at the end of that 3 years, for what I had paid for that 3 years to apply to the principal. That lady fell for it. I mean, she was glad to get it, to get out from underneath it, you know. So she had brought a lease thing. Anyway, we signed it. I had me a building, and I had no money.
Right.
No money.
Wow.
So, and I did not want to get the money from my husband. I was stubborn. I wanted to do it myself. So I had a dear friend. I went to him. He loaned me and Carmen $18,000, and we opened Shades of Hope with $18,000 and a building that was in such disrepair, it was not livable. And what happened, my husband got on board. Everybody out here got on board. Dear friends of mine got on board. Some that had started speaking to me after I got home from treatment. People came in and we all worked on it. We cleaned it up, painted it, did yard work. The man where we were having the party, he's an interior designer. He came in and designed it. He said, paint this, that, and that, and that, and that. And anyway, we got it all done. And we opened February the 28th of 1988, and we had 5 clients.
Wow.
5 clients.
That's amazing. So you go from that to now we're how many years later?
39 years later.
And what is your favorite part of doing this work?
The favorite part, what keeps me going, is the only reason I do this work is I see people get well. I see people get, and how they get well is they figure out through ways that we teach them and give and, instructions and all, they figure out what their problem is. They accept that they admit and accept they have a problem, and they work on it, and they own it, and they get willing to treat it, and people get well. We've got people that have about as much. I have one woman that we had at the Serenity House. She's got as much time. I think we have maybe 6 months different. I have 6 months, maybe more than she does. I mean, we have people that have 39, 40, 41 years of recovery.
What a legacy. Yeah. What a legacy. And I make up that this fills your soul even today with watching people get better and watching them discover that they're not alone.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then I will have to say the core of my heart is working with families. And I've had the opportunity to see whole families come back together that addiction has destroyed, whole families. And I've worked with 3 or 4 generations. I had a family right here in this room, 16 members, and there was 4 generations in this room. And we did a family scald. We did a family psychodrama right here in this room.
That's amazing. And, I, as a frequent flyer, every time I come back, I get something different. But the first thing that what I didn't realize was that fantasy could be an addiction, meaning I wanted a complete family. I wanted everybody to get along. I wanted, no issues. And so anytime there was an issue, I felt like it was my job to solve it. I thought that was being helpful. I had no idea that it was also killing me. It was also making me very resentful. And so the work here is very interesting because it's not about making somebody else bad or wrong. It's about seeing things through your trauma and filters. And you have a surgeon is how I've heard the work in the room. You have a surgical approach because you get to know the clients and you ask lots of questions up front because a lot of these are patterned in the same way. I wasn't the first person that you saw come in a room that was determined, to do something different, not the last. But what you taught me was it's not about being strong enough, it's about surrendering. And it's about you can't have that family. It's not under your control. You can't have that, ultimate fantasy. So what are you going to do? And it was going about the acceptance of, okay, this is what it is. Yeah. And going through the grief of what that fantasy was. And nobody gave that fantasy in my head. I made that up myself.
Right, that's what we did.
I remember in third grade, I sat with several kids and they were talking about how they were living with, a grandparent or a distant aunt or foster care. And I thought, I got my family together here. I must be doing okay. And that was the litmus test or the question that I asked myself for years is like, that was okay. And when that wasn't okay, I was like, what is my purpose now? I can't put everything back together again. I frankly couldn't do it originally either, but you saw that in me. And I remember I'm a visual person. I've got attention deficit as well. And you put two empty chairs in front of me and I sat down and I remember going, I got it. I mean, that was all I had to do was see those two empty chairs. And I said, I picked up my parents' marriage. And you said, yes. And I was like, well, that's probably not the best use of my time. So how do I, give that back? Didn't work for them. It's not going to work for me trying to do it, to try to put it back together. So what I think you have the gift of is helping people that feel seen and validated in their emotion. So maybe the intention for people wasn't necessarily to end up hurting somebody else, but it happens. Like you said earlier, people don't set out to give you a bad day normally, but things happen and this is a safe place to come work on them. So you've created such an environment. And I would argue that you and I have very similar, I think you said to me several times, I see myself in you a little bit, that fire of tell me no.
Yes.
Try me, tell me no, because determination is a gift that comes out of working through anger. And that determination and motivation is the gift of that. And so when you see people embrace that, I know you don't get to see everything, but I'm in a big community of people that have come through Shades, and it's a miracle. And the next thing we're going to try to do with this wonderful miracle is take it to the masses and take it online. And so you have been working your tail off on videos and content and capturing the essence of what this program is, so that if you want to come to Buffalo Gap, that will be here to serve you. And there's 8 people a month. I mean, it's a very limited capacity, but it's such a gift to yourself to give. 15 years later, I've done it numerous times, but we're also taking this online and we're doing short form workshop learning that you can log in anytime you want and hear your voice. Because I think that was the one thing I missed is I felt very strong in the room. When you are looking at me saying, you'll be fine, like you're going to be all right and nobody else has to change in order for you to be okay. It's you and how you're dealing with your life. And I thought, well, okay, that sounds doable. But when I got home, I was like, the first time an issue came up, I felt a little, I need to call somebody because I don't know what to do with this. And so we created an online portal with 20 courses at this point, all of which that have been curated by your knowledge and other expertises as well. We have podcasts on there. We have wonderful material. And so I just want to acknowledge you for keeping those doors open for so long so that through heartache and through really hard work of your own, that we get to now share this with anyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so, one thing I want to say is I knew that there was much more to treating addictions than just stopping the overeating or the undereating or the starving or the alcoholism. I knew that there had to be something more. And this was in the 80s, early 80s, when the talk of codependency first came out. I had never heard of codependency until I went to treatment in 85. And it was really prevalent out there that, I mean, it's the treatment for codependency. And everyone was co-ing somebody, a co-alcoholic or a co-this or a co-that, you know. And so I was intrigued by it, and I didn't know that much about it. So I came back, and then after we, got here and actually started the treatment center, I knew we needed to go deeper. I knew that that we were doing good work getting them into, recovery from their eating disorder. And, we had lots of tools that we were using, and then, and treating all addictions, and it was a blending well. I mean, we were doing good work, but I knew there was more to it. There was more to it. And like I said, I'm a seeker. Yes, so I started seeking again. And I heard about training for codependency. And there was a place up in South Dakota, and it was an 8-day program. And this was really the first year that we here. Now, keep in mind, I opened with a bar at $18,000, and we did pay him back within, I think, 2 months, but money was tight. But it's anyway, it was that first year I knew that there was more to it, that what we were doing, we needed to be doing more. So I heard about that, it was training for codependency. And it was an 8-day. And I went up there, I spent the money. I went up there and flew up there and did the training. And all of my issues came up. All of that I had never dealt with, because talk therapy does about that much good. I mean, zero. Talk therapy will help you get your story straight. You can start talking about it, and getting the details and write about it, talk about it and write about it. That's a good beginning. But that is not, there's so much more to treating trauma or shame or any of the carried feelings. There's so much more to it than just talk therapy. And I'm not putting talk therapy down. I'm putting down therapists that will keep someone in their office 10 years talking about the same problem and not finding a solution. And so I wanted to have a solution-based treatment center. And so I went up there, and I was absolutely surprised at what I learned. We went through it, they wouldn't let us go through it as a client. We would, set up, it was psychodrama. It was a lot of psychodrama. It was all experiential treatment. But we would set up a scenario, but we couldn't do our own work. And they would say, put a bookmark there, put a bookmark there. Well, we were all falling out because our issues were coming up. So I knew I needed to go back. So I came home, waited a month, and went back and did my own work. And what I uncovered, I had known about the sexual abuse, but I had so much shame of talking about it. I had just packed it down. I packed it down and packed it down, and had found a way to live without letting it bother me. So I did that, and then I knew I had more work to do after I went back the second time, and when I went to do my own work. And there was a lady there from Stuart, Florida, called Barbara Caraway. And this is where I tell people, be very careful, pay very close attention to who God puts in your path, because you never know who your teacher's going to be.
It's true.
People teach us what to do, and a lot of them what not to do. So pay attention to who shows up in your life. Of all that I learned up there, I learned more from Barbara Caraway than I did the people running the workshops. She was from Stuart, Florida, and we became dear friends. She became my earth mother. Mm-hmm. She was originally from North Carolina, very overweight, white hair, but she knew codependency at the core, and she had already trained with the people up there, and she had gone back for more training. So I started going to Stuart, Florida, and working with her. And then I did her 5-day intensive. And we were taught how to do intensives where I went in South Dakota. We were taught how to set our practice up to do intensives. And so I went to Barbara's and I went through her intensives. Then I started helping her with her intensives. And then she said, why don't you start them at Shay's? I said, but we've got inpatient. Mm-hmm. And she taught me. And so I started doing weekend intensives. And then I would do 5 days and 6 days and 8 days. But what I'm saying is I didn't just stop when I went to treatment. I didn't just stop. I had to know more about how to really help people. And it was more than the weight. It was more than the drinking. So then while I was with Barbara, I met, anyway, I won't go into all that, but anyway, I would go down there and I actually trained with Barbara. We trained each other. She knew nothing about the eating disorder field. So we worked together. She sent us lots and lots of clients. And then what we became was we're very close friends, just close friends. I sent her clients. She sent us clients. And so I met a woman. I was doing a lot of work in Dallas doing speaking engagements in Dallas because the eating disorder field had just caught on. And I would go about every week to Dallas, even one day, and speak. And I met a woman there called Dr. Ann Worth, and she was at one of my workshops, and there was about 200 people there, and I thought, who am I to be speaking to these PhDs? But I was speaking about eating disorders, and they wanted to learn. And so she came up to me, and she said, I've got a friend that I want you to meet. And she said, actually, she's a business colleague of mine, and she's coming to town. And would you be willing to come back next weekend and meet her? And I said, well, sure. She said, I'll set you up a place to speak. You come back. And so we came back, and who she introduced me to was Pia Melody.
Oh, wow.
And Ann was actually her business partner. So Pia and I got to be good friends. And then I went and did Pia's training. And I went out to the meadows where she worked and did more training out there. Then I went to Carmel, California, and did more training with her out there. Mm-hmm. So what I'm saying is, and I'm going to speak to people in the field, if you really want to know how to work with me, yes, go get that master's degree, get that PhD, but they really do not teach you the type of work that we do here. This is specialized work. And, a lot of them are dying off. That Barbara's passed away. Pia passed away a couple of months ago. I mean, I'm 82. Pia and I are the exact same age, same month, everything. I plan to live to be 100, so I've got a few more years.
Absolutely.
But one of the things, if there's some interest, and I just want to put it out in the universe, I have done training for people before, but I'm really wanting to put together, my daughter Kim and I are really wanting, and maybe Karen, are wanting to put together a training for therapists, because I want someone to be able to carry on the work that we do. I'm not saying that other people can't do what we do, but you need to be trained to do it. You have to know how. And I do think a lot of it is intuitive. When I walk in that therapy room, it is not me doing the work. I go in there, I read every piece of the people's work that they do. They do an 18-page very intense psychosocial forest before they ever before they ever walk to the door into an intensive. And I go over that with a fine-tooth comb. And sometimes I'll call and ask them questions. I want to know who we're dealing with and what their problems are before we walk in there. So I have a good idea of where I'm going to take them. Mm-hmm. I know what's good for them. I know the work we're going to do. Well, I get in there and I turn it over to God, and God takes over, and we go in an entirely different direction. I'll even have it written down what I'm going to do.
And then you don't end up doing...
Don't do that at all.
And what I love about that is because you have that intuition about what their core pain might be.
And that's a God deal.
It's a God deal. And listen, I've been in the room and I've had to sit on my hands for not getting up and helping. And then sometimes got up and helped anyway, I heard. But I'm just saying that kind of work is so life-changing. And to watch someone else go through it was a privilege, because you do a lot of things in group here with 5 or 6 people.
Right.
So it's more individualized, but you get to know people. You know, I'm saying, hi, my name is Chrissy. And then the next thing I know, I'm telling them my deepest, darkest secret. And I don't even know what they do for a living. You know, it gets deep quick, because that's what is necessary to disrupt that pattern, is what I have heard in the room. But yes, I will absolutely take your course, and I want to do this work. It's so
really
powerful.
To formulate a training program, because my memory's still good. I would like to pass it on. I'll tell you, my 2 daughters are therapists that work with me. Karen, my oldest daughter, is very good. She is excellent in talk therapy, and she's is trained to do EMDR. But my middle daughter, Kim, we have worked together for over 30 years. She is very intuitive, and she's at the place that she does not want to carry on the work that she'll work with me as long as I'm working, but she doesn't want to carry the wand.
Sure.
She doesn't want to do that. So I would like to, if anyone would be willing or want to come train, and I'm going to charge, because it's valuable training. I've spent thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars for extra training, like at South Dakota and Florida, and and going. You wouldn't believe what I spent with Pia Melody, but it was worth every penny of it. So I want to come up with a training program for people who have that intuitive nature, but don't know what to do with it, that would really like to take clients deeper, but they're scared to do that. They're scared they won't bring them back. And I'm not saying this in an arrogant way. I have never had fear, and I've worked with some pretty sick, mentally ill people, but I've really never had the fear of taking them too deep that they wouldn't come back. I just go in there with them. I just wallow around in there with them. But I have never failed to see them come back in a different way, come back and leave that trash in the past, but it's sacred work, and I take it very, very serious. It's not just some flippant thing. It is very serious. But there are some good therapists out there that I think that have that intuitiveness, and that's who I would like to work with. There are people that come from their head, and they cannot do this work. They can go through the motions, but it's not a connector. But there is such a good place for that type of therapist that just comes from the knowledge and from talking and listening. A good therapist is a good listener. So I am not putting that down at all. But this is a special kind of area over here.
One of the things that we've worked on the last 6 months together is the online portal, $20 a month. It's very, very good, unlimited watches, and you can watch it in an evening. You can watch a course on codependency and wake up tomorrow and feel completely differently because you get a little education. You can log in if you don't think that you have an addiction. If somebody else that has, it's for everyone. And we will continue to load classes So if you're talking to somebody right now that is looking, they have means and they're looking for a worthy cause to get behind, I would recommend this. And as a result of that, we did the Shades of Hope Foundation to continue that work, which is a nonprofit arm of Shades of Hope. And that is designed to help clients. It's designed to continue the work here, do coursework, whatever we need it to do, but to change people's lives from the inside out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I used to have people to want to donate, and at that time we didn't have a nonprofit, but they would get so much out of the program, and people have handed me checks, big checks, and then they wouldn't get the tax write-off. Today they can hand us the big checks and they'll get the tax write-off, or a little check, just something, because so we can continue to educate people and to treat people. One of the things that we have done is we have given up inpatient treatment. And I'll tell you the reason we gave up, one of my reasons for giving up inpatient treatment, because it got harder and harder and harder to treat people because of finances. They would wait too long to come in for treatment. And by the time they would get to us, not all of them, but a lot of them, by the time they got to us, they needed to stay, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year. I mean, when you get a 60-pound anorexic that's been to every treatment center in the United States and they come to you, you can't turn them out of the door in 42 days.
Right.
And so I had a burden for people. And I burdened my family because of my burden for people. I would go to Christy, my youngest daughter, who was my business manager, and I would ask her, can we scholarship so-and-so and so-and-so and so?
Sure.
And she would make it work. But as a facility, you can't continue to do that. You can't continue to do that. And then I got to doing the intensives, and that's really where my heart is. And one of the things that if there's any therapists listening to this or owners of treatment centers, what I would like to do is really partner with some of the treatment centers. Let me come visit your treatment center. And then when we get someone in an intensive, if they need further help, we could transfer door to door, or they could wait a month and come to, but the ones who come to the intensives, by the time they leave there, if they will follow the directions that we give them, they don't need to be in inpatient treatment. They don't. If they will follow the directions. I'm really sold on doing short-term treatment. So that's one of the reasons that we have given up the inpatient, because they waited too long to come, and then they needed to really be in psych wards, many of them.
Right. It was too deep. And what you've mentioned before is that by the time they come to the door, they've also gambled their money. If the gambling is a problem, their money's gone. If food's a problem, they've eaten it up.
Well, and two, by the time they get to us, a lot of times they've spent all of their insurance money going other places, or they have, their addiction has eaten it up, So the intensive, they get a lot, and they get a lot of me. They get a lot of my two daughters. We are with them, not 24. I mean, we're there many hours of the day from morning to night. They get a lot of all three of us.
Yes.
And I work with each one of them individually. And I'm going to keep doing that as long as I can, because I love the work and I love to see the difference. And, we're coaches. We don't carry the ball. We don't go in for a touchdown. We coach. I sit in my chair and I coach people through their work. And then, their work is theirs. It's theirs. They need to own it. They don't need to put me up on nobody's pedestal. I'm there to coach them through it, because I have been in those chairs. I know what it's like. I've done my own work. I have found the freedom, and other people can find freedom. So I'm plugging two different things, or three or four different things.
Fantastic.
I do have ADD, but one of the things is this donating to Hope of Shades Foundation. Your money will be well spent. Also, we get people all the time wanting to come for the intensive, and they can't afford it. We will discount. At times we do discount the intensive for people. I do think they need to have some skin in the game, but a lot of times they absolutely cannot afford to come. And so that would help people come who really can't afford it. We have people that have come and done the intensive that have paid for people to come.
Sure.
Now we're hoping that they will just give to the foundation, but they've paid for, a lot of people have paid other people's ways here.
It's life-changing.
Yeah.
And if they can catch the gift, they will never look back and regret their old way of doing things. Yeah. So, well, this has been fantastic to talk to. Is there anything else that you feel led to talk about before we close?
The only thing is that I'm grateful for the 40 years of recovery, and she does not want me to give her credit, and that's Dr. Judy Hollis. Had Hollis not written the book, had Hollis not done her own work, she wrote the book out of her own recovery. She was, weighed like 260. She worked at Long Beach Naval Hospital. She worked in the addiction field. She helped stop the heroin did a lot of work in the 70s in New York City. She was a trailblazer. And she had such an eating disorder that she did not know what it was, but she kept plodding along, working in the addiction field. And she was Betty Ford's therapist in Long Beach Naval Hospital. And one day she was walking along, going to a business meeting, and she saw a reflection. She looked in a glass window, and she saw this obese woman, this very obese woman, and she did a double take, and she realized that was her. She'd got where she only looked from the neck up. She wouldn't look at her body, and she saw her full reflection, and she thought, I have got to do something. Well, she was working with alcoholic clients, sending them to 12-step meetings, to AA. She worked with, successfully worked with drug addicts, sending them to Narcotics Anonymous. She believed in the 12 steps. So she found out that there was Overeaters Anonymous meetings. So she started to OA. And she lost her weight going to Overeaters Anonymous. But she realized that there was much more to it than just that overeating and the weight. That it was so much about, it's not what we're eating, but what's eating us. And that's when she developed a treatment program. And I was one of her very first that walked in the door. She says that I'm her most successful. I don't know. We're good friends today. But I do want to give, she does not want the praise, but I will tell you, God working through Judy Hollis, I don't think if Alan had not given me that book, and if I hadn't read it, and if I hadn't taken the action to go and get with Judy Hollis and her program, I wouldn't be here today. So I always want to give Judy the credit. She said, stop doing that. I don't want you to give me the credit.
We love our humble friends.
We're also, I'm speaking on cruises now. I want to throw that out.
Yes.
I've got one coming up January the 9th. We're going to be going out of LA to Cabo sometime, and then we're going to do one to Greece. Sometimes Judy and I are going to do one together. So recovery is hard. recovery, you have to dig in and do the hard work, and you have to do it every day. We don't get days off. You do it every day, every day, every day. And what you're going to see is you're going to get well. You get well, you get healthy, but you keep working at it. You keep doing the same thing every day, and you get healthy. But the thing about it is we also need to have fun along the way. Recovery is fun.
It is fun.
I mean, we get to do things that we never could do before. So anyway, thank you so much, Chrissy, for leading out in this and asking me to do this. All you had to do is set me down in a chair and push a button, and I got to talk.
And you got to talk. We love to talk. I'm so grateful for the relationship that we've built, and kind of being brought into the family tree a little bit to work on some of this material and take it to the next level and carry that legacy on.
I will say, I used to could not even say my name out loud in my adult life. I was so shy and shut down, and recovery has given me a voice, sometimes maybe too much and too loud, but a voice.
We all learn those lessons. There's a course on confrontations in the online courses.